Okay, Ken, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, sir.
Right, thank you, Vincent.
Yeah. So the core objective for us, this digital transformation journey, Ken, let's just dive right in, because the landscape of digital transformation can be incredibly overwhelming for businesses today. So the question we wish to ask you is that how do companies start, and for enterprise that is just the beginning to realize that they need to upgrade their processes, how should they start looking into digitization to ensure they procure the right solution for the long term? Yeah.
Right. I think the very first thing that I would want to advise companies is to do not look at digital transformation as a IT or a software project. Okay. In fact, digital transformation, as it is, we should look at the word transformation. In fact, digital transformation should be derived from a bigger portfolio of concept, which we call it business transformation. So when a company wants to look at ways to be more efficient so that it can be more effective of what they do, that's where it actually establishes the first part about the need for a company to look at transforming their business. And for business to transform, they need to transform their operations. They need to transform their processes. In fact, they need to transform things that they have been currently doing. So digital transformation, as it is today, everything that we do involves software. It involves IT. It involves digital. So that's where the word digital transformation comes in. So when a company begins to have the right mindset of transforming, and then digital transformation is where digital becomes a tool for the company to transform their operations, thereby achieving better efficiency and effectiveness.
Very well said, Ken. Because in this very moment, in Malaysia itself, a lot of large enterprises are into digitization. Some are even already on e-invoicing. And the next question we wish to check with you is that for large enterprises versus SME, when we often see large enterprises investing in multiple solutions across different platforms, while mid to small enterprises struggling even at the beginning, what are the most common pitfalls you see both groups making when trying to digitize?
Okay. Actually, to have a project to be successful, I think it's not so much whether it's a big organization or a smaller company, right? I think the company would need to be very clear what are their pain points, what they're trying to address, and what are the areas that they need to transform. In fact, with every company, whether it's big or small, should look at it from this perspective, right? Yes, of course, in a big organization, companies do have resources, whether it's manpower resources or the money to spend on investment. I mean, there are a lot more resources. Sure. For example, as an SME people, the company usually are strapped down with resources, time, yes, and manpower. Yeah. We all know about that, right? Yeah. So that part, yes, there's the differences, right? But having said that, I don't think we should be constrain ourselves with this kind of attributes of a different size of company. But rather, if an organization is able to look at and be very clear in areas where they need to transform, and then thereby deriving a strategy to transform it digitally, as a start, they can then sit back and start to analyze and review what can they do, how can they do, when can they do, right? And that's where it begins to, the company will then able to explore what kind of technology around, what kind of vendors is available, and what kind of price point that is suitable for them, right? And there are many ways, honestly speaking, to do that.
Excellent. Because as far as I'm concerned, the questions that we usually receive from clients that there are so many multiple software or platforms in the market, and sometimes subscription can be also very headache. And the next thing we want to know is why is it so crucial for organization to aim for one single platform when it comes to digitizing, And how does that impact the seamless user experience and ease of use?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. Many companies these days have two different scenario. One scenario is that some companies have too many software applications or too many different systems, and they would hope to have something that can unify them together. So that's one part, especially bigger company may face. The smaller company may have maybe one or two system able to do certain things, and they would like to do more things. So you have two different perspectives, right? Now, and if we were to look at these two perspectives very differently, okay, so the first one I'd like to address is the bigger companies, right? So the bigger company may end up having too many systems, right? And they want to combine into one or hope to unify into one. Now, one of the common mistake that these companies do is to, they may think that, okay, today they may have ABC system. And in order to have this ABC to be unified together, they may want to look for a system called D to replace A, B, and C, thinking that D can do these three things, right? But in realistic technological environment or situation, right, each system is good to do its own thing. For example, ERP system, right, generally speaking, is focused on company finance operation, right, and some operational aspect depending on what kind of ERP system and which industry they are in. WMS, warehouse management system, right? They are specialized for certain industry and certain company like logistic company, right? To help them manage their warehousing needs and managing even, for example, transport management, routing optimization, and so forth. So let's take these two as an example, right? These two systems are good at what they do, right? Now, so if a company happens to have a need for these two different systems, face it, they cannot combine these two into one.
Agreed.
Because these two are specialized systems in their own rights. Okay. But on the other hand, there is a need to unify system, right? So how do we bridge that? So that's where BPM, business process management, is an excellent strategy for company to embrace. Why? Because BPM actually covers two areas. One, technology. So BPM is a unifying technology fabric where it actually brings different systems into a unified platform. And at the same time, it provides integration, it provides orchestration of workflow that would be required to automate for system to system talking to one another. Okay, so that's one. At the same time, BPM is also a process initiative, meaning to say, unlike looking at a project as a software, a BPM project actually facilitates the company to review their business processes. To the extent they may need to redesign their process, or at worst, they may need to re-engineer the process, right? Meaning to say that it's time for them to review the process to optimize it, and taking advantage of the process study and discovery, they can improve the process and automate it at the same time. So you see that BPM becomes an excellent strategy for company to both optimize their process at the same time, technically using software and technology to automate this process, and yet at the same time unifying and orchestrating different systems together. So that's addressed in the first part. Now, on the second part, for smaller companies, right, which may have one system, and yet they may need to automate certain processes, right? But because they are smaller organizations, the volume of certain transaction is not that extensive. So for them to invest or to buy a different system, it may be very hard to justify the cost. That's one. Secondly, because the company is not big, it doesn't mean their process are simple, right? Whether it's a product simple or not, it depends how the operation and what industry they are in.
Agree.
So some of these smaller companies, they may need to redesign their process, but automate it. But at the same time, any off-the-shelf applications are too restrictive for them to do that. So with that, that is also where BPM address or answers to these challenges. So a BPM allows even the SME to simply automate processes very quickly, especially these days. Some of the BPM platform has this zero code workflow automation. So being a small company, they don't need to be so complex in the way they automate a system, right? They can use a zero code module to simply automate a form, automate a process, right? Connect it to their backend system, and there you go. They can actually automate certain processes which their current system cannot fulfill. So in this regard, BPM addresses digital transformation in two broad categories. For the big one, they unify various systems. For the smaller company, they extend from the existing system.
Excellent, excellent. Because to a lot of our listeners, they might be coming from large enterprises or small enterprises, and they will be extremely great that they'll be able to automate their current processes using the business BPM, business process management. And there are some companies that whereby they wish to know, in one company they have enterprises, they have a lot of different business processes, right? So when we talk about prioritizing, that means prioritize which process to be automated. Practically speaking, which workflow or processes should you think an enterprise should actually prioritize in automating? Example, right? The accounts receivable. That's the most important part of the company because you receive, that's the invoicing part that it has a direct impact on the company's revenue.
Yeah, because the company collects money, right?
Yeah. So, in your opinion, which area of workflow should be prioritized as the first to automate for the best return on investment?
Right. Actually, there isn't one single process or one single department that a company would need to. It all varies from different company, different industry, and also the level of complexity of their processes, and also the pain point that each company is facing, right? Just let me give you a very simple example. In the past, when we automate financial workflow processes, any layman would think that if you were to automate something like accounts receivable, which you just mentioned earlier on, Vincent, accounts receivable is about receiving money, right? I mean, as the owner or as the head of company, right, I would like to automate something so I can collect money faster.
Exactly.
So you think that is probably the ROI is there.
Yep.
And AP, which is accounts payable, which is the other opposite, right?
Yep.
It's about paying your suppliers,
On
right?
time.
So why do I automate to pay my supplier faster?
Yep.
It's not beneficial to me, but it's beneficial to my supplier. Why would I do that? Would I digitalize the process to pay my supplier? It isn't right.
Right.
Yeah, some people may have this thinking, but in reality, it all again depends on the company and focus and the priorities and the industry they are in. Let's take, for example, we have a very successful customer in Singapore that actually processes 60 to 80,000 invoices a month.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Huge, right? So you can imagine 1 month, right? They have a team of finance people that does matching of purchase order, matching of supplier invoice, matching of delivery order, requiring the need to verify if the DO or the invoice is rubber stamp and initial, by their warehouse people and all that, to make sure all the documents are in place, to make sure that the items match with the purchase order, then they will send to the finance to make payment, right? So this process, a lot of work.
A lot of manual work.
And a lot
worker
of
have to stay on overtime just to do this.
And you cannot make mistakes,
There's
right?
an overtime cost on this.
Exactly. So you're perfectly right. So before they digitalize, they have a team of finance people that are required to do OT minimum 3 nights a week.
There's a cost to the company.
Yeah, it costs the company. It costs to electric bill. It costs
Agree.
to having an aircon, and it costs even a company to have to cater or charter buses or vans to bring them
A lot
to
of
the train
intangible
station
costs
and all that, right?
Yeah.
But worst of all, it actually tire out their staff, and they even face a situation where the staff cannot take it anymore and they want to resign. Then they have manpower problem. So you see how this thing can escalate. Now, so looking at this as a case study, right? So the company faces a dire need to solve their AP problem. So that is to say, now they are able to automatically using AI to verify all these APPO, DO invoices together by the BPM software system. And the great news is that they can manage these 60 to 80,000 invoices a month without staff increase and zero OT.
Excellent. And also zero error.
Zero error, and the staff are happy,
Okay.
right? And and the suppliers are happy because they get punctual payment. Finance is happy because they're assured that the AP system is helping them to eliminate a lot of error and mistakes. Yeah. So if you look at this example, AP is paying to suppliers, but why would company automate?
Okay.
Right. So you can see that the need actually differs from company to company.
Yeah. So I agree. So is that when you comes into selecting your priority, so that you should actually leverage into more depends what you need.
Correct.
Do a thorough assessment.
Yeah.
Is where if you notice that this is the area where you felt a lot of cost incur. Example, like you mentioned, manual checking of invoices that incur cost of overtime, incur cost of transportation for my staff. That's the area that I should be looking into into BPM.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Vincent, just to add on, in fact, just besides these tangible matters that a company can improve, actually there are a lot of intangible benefits. Like for example, to this implementation, to transforming the way their AP used to do to the digital way, the company has in fact grown a stronger and closer relationship with their supplier. Right. So because of the payment are prompt and all that, the suppliers are able to give better discount. The suppliers are give better quality, better service, happier in dealing business with them. Right. And as such, these intangible benefits, honestly, it outweighs many things.
Yeah. It makes everything is so efficient and productive now.
Correct.
Good. Well, in the market solution today, this is the next question I wish to ask you, Mr. Ken. There is a lot of big brands in the market, all right, coming from the e-procurement system, the document management system, the proof delivery system, etc. So there are big brands out there. Some enterprises will prefer to subscribe to these solutions, right, because of their brand identity.
Right.
And at times, these solutions might come up with hefty price tag too. Right. So, in your opinion, how should an enterprise procure and assess these commercial costs? Because when it comes into digitization, you want to digitize some process, you need to invest onto a solution, right? So, how do you procure and assess these commercial costs versus the needs?
Yeah, I think for a company, having big brands and good brands are very assuring, right? But in digital transformation projects, what is more important is the ability for the vendor, right, to able to demonstrate their experience, right, their success cases, their knowledge, especially in the area of process automation and the area of digital transformation, right? Just imagine, right, you can have a very popular cars imported in the country, but if you don't have the necessary skill of a workshop or the spare parts that is like available immediately, right? You have a good brand of the car, but do you think you are able to have a reliable car letting you drive around 24/7?
Okay.
Right.
Agree. Yeah. So the next question we will ask you is that in terms of hardware, in this current digital era, especially like I mentioned, companies are going to e-invoicing, companies are going scanning more than printing, and a lot of companies are reducing prints. They are, trying to minimize printing because printing is a cost to the company, and hiring additional printers is also cost. So, in your opinion, for business process automation, is there a in digital transformation, what are the important hardware? Do you think hardware is important, all right, to ensure a seamless integration? We need with any of the solutions that enterprises are planning to adopt.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Hardware are necessary players in the whole entire digital transformation project. Okay. Right. So the only thing is that I would encourage companies to look at hardware not as a hardware by itself. They should look at hardware as, like I said earlier on, as part of the theme of the whole digital transformation. What do I mean by that? For example, let's say we're talking about multifunction devices that we are all familiar with, all the digital copiers and all that, right? Which you can do print, scan, fax, and photocopy, right? If a company were to look at this hardware as it is, and when you want to upgrade this equipment, you say, look, I want to look for the most latest model that has a higher speed, better print quality, and everything else. I think this kind of way of evaluating is a little bit passé, if you don't mind me to say that, right? With due respect, right?
Okay.
Why is it so? Because with the advent of software technology, especially AI and everything else, what is then should be looked upon is that these devices are no longer should be seen with all these attributes. In fact, they should companies should evaluate this hardware to have the attributes that they are able to be enabled with software to make them to become IoT, which is becoming Internet of Things. Meaning to say that those multi-function devices are no longer just doing this kind of printing and scanning. In fact, they should be like a mini computer working with the internet solutions. They become smarter, right? So that when you scan, for example, you do not need to scan to your email or to your desktop, and then you have to click several times to move it into the cloud server, to rename the file and all that. That is, again, the passé, the old way of doing things, right? So today, if you can have such multi-device where you scan, and immediately and intelligently, these documents were able to trigger a software automation right from the cloud, or even to scan, archive, and automatically rename the file and place where you decide to place in a specific folder just with one touch, and the software does with the AI everything. This is what you need.
Wow. I think a lot of enterprises will be so happy to see every penny that you invest on so-called you pay on the printer, because I think there are still companies out there paying monthly rentals to hardware, and some even procuring to get a new hardware. And today, if you want to procure a new hardware, you need to make sure that your hardware gives a value. All right. Those days, the printer can only do copy, print, scan, fax, and emailing. But now, with PPM in place, you can do much more. You can do archiving, you can do scanning. So you must have that kind of
and we call it embedded applications. Basically, we embed the software into these multifunction devices and turn them into IoT.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Ken. But we want to have a last question before we wrap up for our first episode, right? So our final question is that looking at the rapid advancement of technology today, what is that one piece advice that you give businesses today to ensure digitizing decisions made today remain relevant, effective for 5 to 10 years now?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The one piece of advice I would say is that the software technology must able to embrace and accelerate a company journey into digital transformation, right? So, in short, right, the technology, in order to embrace and accelerate digital transformation, the technology should come from the foundation of business process focus. Because if you were to look into digital transformation, the heart of transforming things is about the ability for a company to redesign their process, optimize the process. And in order to do that, the technology must able to support this foundation of truth to move into digital
Excellent,
transformation.
excellent. Understand. Okay. Thank you. Those incredible insights, Mr. Ken. Right. So it's really a highlight that the digital transformation isn't just about buying a software. It's about finding a unified, flexible platform that scales with your business and choosing a partner you can trust. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you,
this
Vincent.
morning, Ken,
Yeah.
and sharing your expertise on how both large and enterprises can navigate their digital transformation journey effectively. So we're going to wrap up our first episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Vincent.
listening. That's it. That's the wrap up of our first episode in digital transformation. Thank you to Ken Loke for his insights and his experience sharing on how he helped companies into digitizing their workflow. In the coming episode, we're going to discuss about business process management. We're going to talk about workflow automation. And most importantly, we talk about how AI can assist you in your daily workflow. Do stay tuned with us in our podcast, and we shall discuss this over the next episode. Thank you.
DYNAMX